Canadian government will now match the United States by removing all of Canada's tariffs on U.S. goods specifically covered under CUSP.
Canada has just backed down in a $21 billion trade standoff with the United States, removing 25% tariffs on a wide range of American goods after weeks of mounting pressure from President Donald Trump. This isn't just another headline, it's a clear demonstration of how Trump's hardline trade strategy is reshaping North America's economic reality. For months, Canadian tariffs on U.S. exports, from orange juice to appliances, were hammering American producers and threatening to drag both economies deeper into inflation. Trump responded the only way he knows, escalating the fight. He threatened new tariffs on Canadian metals, autos, and even hinted at punishing digital trade measures. The message was blunt: either Canada drops its retaliatory tariffs, or Washington will turn the screws even harder. Prime Minister Carney folded. Late last week, Ottawa quietly announced the removal of those tariffs, citing alignment with U.S. exemption lists under USMCA. But make no mistake, this wasn't goodwill or economic cooperation. This was a forced retreat under U.S. pressure, and it's being seen across the world as a major trade win for Trump. The implications are massive. American farmers and manufacturers just got relief from retaliatory costs. Canadian exporters now risk being squeezed harder by Trump's still-standing metal and auto tariffs, and global markets are watching as the U.S. proves, once again, that Trump's tariff-first strategy gets results. The key question now is whether this victory stabilizes U.S. Canada trade, or whether it's just the opening shot in a larger battle that could redraw the map of North American commerce. To understand why this $21 billion reversal matters so much, we need to step back to the root of the conflict. Canada didn't slap those tariffs out of nowhere. They were part of a broader retaliation against Trump's trade strategy, a strategy built on tariffs, threats, and pressure. Trump made it clear from day one of his administration that the U.S. would no longer accept what he called unfair trade practices from allies or rivals. Canada, despite being America's closest trading partner, was not spared. When Trump hit steel and aluminum imports with heavy tariffs, Ottawa fired back, targeting U.S. exports of consumer goods, food products, and manufactured items worth over $21 billion. The goal was simple: make American exporters feel the pain, divide U.S. business interests, and push Trump to back off. But instead of caving, Trump doubled down. He used the tariffs as leverage, threatening not just to expand them on Canadian metals, but also to go after autos, a critical pillar of Canada's economy, and even Canada's controversial digital services tax, which targeted U.S. tech giants. Each move raised the stakes higher, and instead of weakening Trump's position, Canada's retaliatory tariffs ended up cornering Ottawa. Inflation was rising at home, Canadian manufacturers were absorbing higher costs, and foreign investors began questioning whether Canada could sustain a drawn-out trade war with the world's largest economy. Prime Minister Carney's government quietly realized the math didn't add up. Fighting Trump with tariffs wasn't hurting the U.S. nearly as much as it was hurting Canada. By late August, Ottawa decided to retreat, framing the rollback as alignment with U.S. exemptions under USMCA. In reality, it was a political climb down. Canada chose to preserve economic stability rather than risk a full-blown trade crisis with Washington. Trump, meanwhile, wasted no time portraying the move as proof that his hardline tactics deliver. By forcing Canada to blink first, he not only secured immediate relief for American exporters but also sent a message to Europe and Asia: retaliatory tariffs won't work against the US anymore. This context is key, because it shows that the tariff fight was never just about Canada's $21 billion in duties. It was about power, leverage, and who sets the rules of trade in North America. The immediate impact of Canada's tariff retreat is already visible across key sectors. For American exporters, this is a direct win. U.S. farmers, who were paying extra just to get their products into Canada, now have a clear path back into one of their largest foreign markets. Industries like orange juice, dairy, and processed foods, hit hard by Canada's retaliatory duties, will now see a sharp cost reduction, boosting competitiveness and sales. U.S. manufacturers, especially in the appliance and machinery sectors, stand to regain lost ground as Canadian importers drop the additional tariffs that made American goods less attractive. On the Canadian side, however, the picture is far less optimistic. Ottawa's tariffs were originally meant to even the score, but in reality they ended up raising prices on Canadian consumers and businesses. Imported American goods became more expensive, supply chains got squeezed, and inflationary pressure added to the economic pain already facing Canada's middle class. By removing the tariffs, the Canadian government is essentially admitting that its policy backfired. Yet the damage lingers. Canadian industries that relied on tariff protection now face renewed U.S. competition without the buffer, and domestic producers are bracing for a hit. Investors, too, are watching carefully. If Canada can be pressured into backing down once, what stops Trump from pushing harder next time? Meanwhile, in the U.S., Trump is using this victory to argue that his strategy works not only against rivals like China but also against allies who take advantage of America. This narrative is politically powerful. It strengthens his case that tariffs are not just punishment, they are leverage, tools to bend trade partners into submission. Economically, the result is a redistribution of costs. U.S. producers gain relief, Canadian exporters lose protection, and the broader North American economy tilts more heavily toward Washington's terms. But the bigger story isn't just about today's numbers, it's about the precedent. Trump has shown that he can force a G7 nation, America's closest neighbor, to roll back billions in tariffs. That will have ripple effects far beyond the current trade dispute. Beyond dollars and cents, this reversal has deep geopolitical consequences. U.S. Canada relations have always been framed as a partnership of equals, but Trump's latest victory exposes the imbalance of power more clearly than ever. By forcing Canada to retreat on $21 billion worth of tariffs, Trump has effectively reminded Ottawa, and the rest of the world, that economic alignment with Washington is not optional, it's mandatory. This weakens Canada's leverage in future negotiations under the USMCA trade pact, giving the U.S. even more authority to dictate terms on auto rules of origin, agricultural quotas, and digital trade policy. Allies are also paying attention. For Europe, which is still tangled in disputes with Washington over steel, agriculture, and tech regulations, the message is obvious: if Canada couldn't withstand Trump's tariff war, what chance do smaller economies have? For Asia, particularly countries like Japan and South Korea that balance trade ties between the U.S. and China, the Canadian reversal reinforces the idea that Washington under Trump will aggressively defend its own economy, even at the cost of straining traditional alliances. At home in Canada, the move also stirs political consequences. Prime Minister Carney's government now faces criticism for appearing weak and reactive, while Trump seizes the moment to showcase himself as the defender of American workers and industries. For Trump, this isn't just a policy win, it's a political talking point he can repeat on the campaign trail. He can now point to Canada, a G7 neighbor, and say, "We made them back down." That kind of message resonates not just with his base, but with undecided voters who view toughness in trade as synonymous with strength in leadership. Geopolitically, then, this is bigger than one trade skirmish. It shifts the balance of power in North America, reinforces Trump's tariff doctrine, and signals to every global partner that when it comes to Trump's America, resistance is costly, compliance is safer. The big question now is, what comes next? Canada's rollback might close one chapter of the trade fight, but it doesn't mean Trump is done. If history is any guide, victories like this only embolden him to push further. With Canada having blinked first, Trump now has leverage to demand concessions in other areas, whether it's agricultural quotas under USMCA, digital tax exemptions for U.S. tech companies, or stricter rules on auto manufacturing that favor American plants. Each of these issues could become the next battleground. For Canada, the danger is clear: giving ground now might invite even more pressure later. Trump has repeatedly signaled that no trading partner, ally, or rival gets a free pass if the deal isn't in America's favor. That means Ottawa could soon face renewed threats of auto tariffs, fresh restrictions on metals, or demands to rework sections of the trade pact. Economists warn that this kind of uncertainty could deter investment in Canada, as businesses hesitate to commit capital in an environment where U.S. trade policy can shift overnight. On the U.S. side, while exporters celebrate the relief, there's also the risk of complacency. Trump's victory narrative may overshadow the long-term reality that trade wars disrupt supply chains, raise consumer costs, and trigger retaliation from other regions like Europe or Asia. Still, from a purely strategic standpoint, Trump has proven that his tariff-first approach works as leverage, and he will almost certainly apply the same tactics elsewhere. The world is watching to see where he aims next. If it's Canada again, Ottawa may have little choice but to comply quickly rather than risk another bruising standoff. If it's Europe or China, they now know that even close allies like Canada couldn't resist. In short, the Canadian retreat is not the end of Trump's tariff battles, it's a green light for more. At the end of the day, Canada's $21 billion tariff rollback is not just another trade adjustment, it's a defining moment in North American economic relations. Trump has managed to secure what Canadian leaders spent months trying to resist, a public retreat that demonstrates the sheer weight of American leverage. Ottawa's strategy was simple: retaliate with tariffs, hope Washington would compromise, and preserve an image of equal footing. But that gamble failed. Instead of backing down, Trump doubled down, threatening even harsher penalties on Canadian metals, autos, and digital trade. Faced with the reality of economic pain at home, higher consumer costs, inflationary pressure, and growing anger from Canadian businesses, Prime Minister Carney's government folded. The removal of tariffs was not a gesture of goodwill, it was a forced admission that Canada could not withstand prolonged economic pressure from its southern neighbor. For Trump, this is more than a trade victory, it's a political and strategic triumph. Domestically, he now has a clear, tangible example to point to when arguing that his America First trade policies deliver results. He can go to the campaign trail and say, "Look at Canada. They hit us with tariffs. We hit back, and they backed down." That narrative resonates deeply with working-class voters who believe America has been exploited in trade for decades. Internationally, the signal is even louder. If a wealthy G7 ally so closely integrated with the U.S. economy cannot stand up to Trump's tariffs, what chance does Europe have in steel disputes? What chance does Asia have in semiconductor or tech battles? Canada's retreat shows that resistance leads to pain, but compliance brings relief, a simple, powerful lesson every U.S. trading partner is now digesting. The longer-term consequences may be even more significant. Canada's credibility as a negotiating partner has been weakened, making it harder for Ottawa to claim equal footing in future USMCA adjustments. Domestic Canadian industries, stripped of tariff protection, now face sharper U.S. competition. Investors and businesses see a clear risk: trade policy in North America is no longer about quiet diplomacy, it's about who can endure economic pressure the longest, and Canada just showed it can't. Meanwhile, Trump is emboldened. Having demonstrated that tariffs aren't just a threat but an effective tool of coercion, he will almost certainly apply the same strategy to Europe, Asia, and even back to Canada if new disputes arise. The bottom line is this: Canada's $21 billion rollback is more than a policy correction, it's a turning point. It proves that Trump's tariff doctrine works in practice, not just in theory. It rebalances power in North America firmly toward Washington. And it sends a global message that when Trump says America will no longer be taken advantage of, he means it. This wasn't just a trade win, it was a demonstration of strength, leverage, and political will. And for Trump, it's only the beginning.